it's our pleasure and it's our privilege to have Shri Anand Neelakantan, the best-selling author of India and of international repute, with us for the second masterclass for the PM YUVA authors. Shri Neelakantan has been closely associated with this scheme, and we have been getting his support and inputs at many stages. And before I gave a formal introduction to Shri Anand Neelakantan and we go on with the proceedings, I would first request our director, Shri Yuvraj Malik, to make a welcome note on this occasion. Sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vikramji. Very good afternoon to all. Sir, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, sir.
It's my pleasure and great honor to welcome you for this wonderful dream getting realized, where all you are young, upcoming, versatile authors getting mentored by people like you who have a very versatile experience. It's a very unique opportunity that our youth, our YUVA is also very versatile, and our mentor is also very versatile. He's a renowned author, writer, script writer, screenplay writer, cartoonist, columnist, and I'll say almost all dimensions of creativity. He has proven his credentials, and that's the beauty of it. And I want all the young minds to get an exposure of it. That is the whole idea about it. Another point I would like to tell all the YUVA is from the day one, sir has been very whosoever, whether they are mentors or the jury. When we floated this idea, they were just moving in sync with us, and out of way they have given us their time. So I really thank you for all the support which you extended from the days of selection and jury, sir. We are very, very grateful for that. Another aspect I would like to share with my team is there's a lot to learn from, sir. Writing books, are many successful authors. There are many successful writers. Their books have been best-selling. Of course, sir has done all the best-selling editions. But the best part is the kind of positivity you exude from your personality, your words, the conduct, your body language, that reflects in your writing. To create something which is creative in nature, you have to ensure that you surround yourself positively. That is one of the most remarkable thing when you meet, sir. That's what you must learn. When you will talk, you will understand that what I am talking. And lastly, without taking much of time, we are really honored that you are shaping young minds, which we have selected together. And I am very sure all these people someday will carry on the legacy which you are setting up. They will carry the flag which you have put in a high esteem. And definitely they will make the country proud the way you have done it. My all best wishes to you, all the participants, and my gratitude to you, sir. Thank you so much for sparing time. And I'll keep myself if my time is over. So over to you, Vikramji.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. It would be, in order to read out the formal profile of Shri Anand Neelakantan so that the young authors can really gauge the stature of the speaker. And before I move on, I have two pieces of information for the participants. One, that I think it will be a good idea if you put on your videos. And second, in the chat box, sometime there would be a link for attendance. So before you exit after the end of the program, please do fill in that Google link, which is for attendance. Anand Neelakantan is an Indian author, columnist, screenwriter, television personality, and motivational speaker. He has authored 5 fiction books in English and 1 in Malayalam. His debut work, Asura, The Tale of the Vanquished, is based on the Indian epics of Ramayana. His next book series was Ajaya Roll of the Dice, Ajaya Rise of Kali, the 2 books on the epic Mahabharata told from Kaurava perspective. Anand's books voice the suppressed party or the defeated party. His 5th book, Vanara, The Legend of Bali, Sugriva, and Tara, also follow the same pattern of expressing the defeated side. Anand Neelakantan also had signed with the producers of Baahubali, the blockbuster film, for a 3-book series based on the movie, and the series will be a prequel to the film. The first book of this trilogy, The Rise of Sivagami, was released in March 2017. Netflix has announced a web series on the book. His books have been translated to different languages such as Tamil, Hindi, Malayalam, Telugu, Kannada, Marathi, Bengali, Gujarati, Assamese, and Indonesian Bhasha. Anand Asura is one of the 100 books to be read in lifetime as per Amazon. The book has sold more than 500,000 copies across the years. 3 of Anand Neelakantan's books have been shortlisted for Crossword Award during the respective years, and is also listed as one among the 100 top celebrities in India in 2015 and 2017 by Forbes India. All his books have got critical accreditation from various people across the world. So I have the pleasure again to welcome Shri Anand Neelakantan, and the floor is all yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar Vikram sir, and thank you, Director sir, Yuvraj Singh ji, and a very warm welcome to you all. This will be a very informal chat. I wish it was a direct face-to-face chat instead of having it over the Zoom call or a WebEx or whatever it is. One day, perhaps we will have a whole day session in some place where we can meet together. 1 hour or half an hour for a session on writing is very less. But so this will be an introductory session. A small correction. So far, I think it is not updated. My website might not be updated. It is 11 books, not 5 books actually. 11 books. And why I think this topic which I am going to take today is important is because a little bit of experience I have in it. I had, apart from the books, I had written television series like Siya Ke Ram, Mahabali Hanuman, but the historical series like Chakravarti Ashoka in Colors TV, which was quite a hit some years back. Also in Netflix, Sarfarosh, The Battle of Saragadi. This is also a historical fiction where the 21 Sikh warriors against 10,000 Pathans, the greatest last stand on earth. That is one series which I had written for the Netflix, which is still available on the Netflix. Then for the Baahubali, it is strictly not a historical fiction, but it was written like a historical fiction. The entire prequel to Baahubali, The Rise of Shivagami, Chadringa, and Queen of Mahichmati, the 3-book series. So now I am doing something for the Doordarshan also, for the Discovery of India kind of program, which will be released soon. That is 500 years of colonial history of India, right from the arrival of Vasco da Gama to 1947, our freedom. So there, where I am, it's like a docudrama kind of series which I'm doing. So I've been working in this space of historical fiction and the mythological fiction. What do you understand by historical fiction? Will be the first question. I would suggest that in case you have any doubt, even while I am speaking, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand. If you put it in the chat as I am speaking, I can see it and address it as I speak itself. Then we can have for the specific question and answer session after the session, we can have that also at that time. But when I am speaking, you can write it in the chat box. So what specifically is historic fiction? And how do we write historic fiction? What is the difference between writing history, writing pure fiction, and writing historic fiction? These are the 3 different things actually. Historic fiction is a very specific genre. All of you, I think I was a part of this, so I had read many of your works who have come into this program, this great program, PM YUVA program, which NBT is doing on the guidance of Honorable Prime Minister. So this is to bring historic fiction authors as such, but basically historic fiction authors. What is historic fiction? That we'll be addressing first. Why we had to write, what is the need of having historic fiction in India? That also we need to address. Since you are all writing, you have written a few of it which you had selected, but more you are getting groomed to write more on historic fiction. So why it is important to write it and how to write it, this is a brief introduction I will be giving now. First of all, India has a big problem. Indians are one of the greatest storytellers in the world. Our stories from time immemorial had gone all across the world, especially towards the better part of Asia. Ramayana and Mahabharata were carried by the traders through ships. It went through two routes actually. One through the Himalayan route over land through the Silk route, other from South India through the ship route. So there are even lot of things went from India through this trade route, but one of the greatest things which we took away from India and gave it to the world is our epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and our short story series. This went both east and to west. To west, it went to Arabia and then to Europe. To east, it went to, through the sea route, it went to Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, that through from the south and the eastern part of the country, that is starting from Bengal, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. It went to, a lot of the stories went to east, and starting on the west coast from Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Kerala, it went to west also. So Arabian Tales owe a lot to one of our great collection of short stories, Katha Sarit Sagar. The Katha Sarit Sagar itself owe it to something called Brihat Katha, which was written not in Sanskrit, not in the any other classical languages of India like Pali or Tamil, but in a language called Paishaji. So Brihat Katha was written first. Brihat Katha, it is told that Brihat Katha is 10 times the size of Mahabharata, almost 10 lakh slokas, both in prose and verse. From Brihat Katha came Katha Sarit Sagar, only a small part of it, and then a part of it became Vikram Vedal, Vedala Vanjavashati, and all those stories, which inspired Arabian Tales and which went to Europe. Arabian Tales exactly is not totally inspired from that, but almost 40-50% of the stories you can find that Arabian Tales were inspired. It went from the west coast. On the east coast side, the Ramayana went to Bali, Indonesia, Malaysia, Sumatra, Philippines, up to the borders of Australia, New Zealand. The stories traveled. Through the Silk Route, it traveled to China, it traveled to Mongolia. So the Garuda stories are popular in Mongolia. It is popular in Indonesia. Ramayana is popular in Thailand. And these are all different Ramayanas and Mahabharatas. So India always had a great storytelling tradition. But what we lacked is telling historical fiction. We are accused by the Westerners, and it is true to an extent, that we don't have a sense of history. We rarely recorded history properly. If you don't record history, then how will you write historical fiction? One of the rare exceptions is Rajadarangani of Kalhana, which came from Kashmir, and a few of such books which came from Tamil Nadu and Karnataka in the medieval centuries. This is a sum total of the history recording as such we have done. All other things have been through storytelling. We have glorified many of our kings. Some have become gods. We have the habit of making many of the kings, leaders, saints as gods. This is a way in which we honor people. Nothing wrong with that. But we had not given much importance to history. Whatever history, it had its own advantage and disadvantage. One advantage is that we are not bothered about the wars. We never glorified much of the kings. If you see across our culture, we are glorified more of poets like Kalidasa or Bhasa or Kambar or Pamba or various other language, Tulasidas. We are glorified the poets, we are glorified the writers, we are glorified the saints from Adi Shankara or the various saints from Buddha onwards to Shankara, to in Buddhism, if you see from Buddha to Nagarjuna to Jaina to Basava to Surdas. We glorified the saints, we had the legends of the saints. We rarely bothered about who ruled who attacked who, which war, who won. Even Ramayana or Mahabharata, it is less about the war and more about life. These are all good things. These all inspired great art. These all inspired great architecture, the great temples, the great architectural monuments in the country, the great poetry, drama, music. It inspired a lot. But again, we lacked historical fiction. One of the first historical fiction, perhaps what we find, is that of Prithviraj, which itself, the tradition started perhaps only after the advent of the Islamic rulers in the country. If you see Harivamsa, if you see the other many of the things where we attempted to write historical fiction, they are gone into the thing of legends and lores. We don't have a date, we don't have things. Even Ashoka, the king Ashoka, which we now call great, about him, it was Sir Mortimer Wheeler who found it. It was the the British archaeologist who talked about Ashoka. Indian tradition, storytelling had totally ignored a great king like Ashoka himself. We talk about Vikramaditya, but we know very less about the historicity of Vikramaditya. So why I'm telling all these things is we know about India, we romanticize about India, less through our own people writing about it, but through the people who have come here, who have written through the British's eyes, through various people's eyes, and an imitation of it. That is how we have been writing through it. Now the question comes, why should we have historical fiction? Why not just tell history? Don't it spoil, who is it? Kapil Mevada has written, won't it spoil the history's pure character? Or can we put fiction for the betterment and inspiration for the people without any hassles? First thing is that writing pure history is almost impossible. You cannot even, history is like a detective novel actually, isn't it? It is a reconstruction of things. It's also an opinion of people, a group of people, basically scholars, not the layman, basically historical scholars who put together a lot of opinion. There is nothing like this is the history. Everything will have hundreds of opinion because it is subject to interpretation. You cannot, you only certain things we can tell it for sure. Like if I take, it's not purely history, just for the understanding sake I am telling, Mahabharata war. We don't have any historical proof as such. Here and there, some hints are there. Here and there, you have certain things. I'm not talking about the WhatsApp university, what kind of messages people get. That's all. That is historic fiction, actually, if you ask me. But actual history, if you see it as history, is a science. History is a science. Science has a lot of brain. It has very less heart. We need to learn science. Science takes the world forward. But what keeps us rooted is the storytelling. Historic fiction merges these two. Historic fiction is not 100% true. So I'm coming to the example of Mahabharata war, answering you, Mr. Kapil. There is no doubt that in Mahabharata war, Kauravas, almost all Kauravas were killed, if you go by the story. There is no doubt in when you say that India won freedom on 1947, August 15, 1947, a recent history if you take. These are the historical facts. Many of these things we don't even know. We don't know when actually Adi Shankara lived. It's a guesstimate. When Aryabhatta lived, we had no clue. Where did Aryabhatta belong to? We don't know. Aryabhatta, the great scientist, even about science we are talking about this. See, it's not even a king or anything. Aryabhatta has claimants from, Aryabhatta was born in Kashmir, Aryabhatta was born in Bihar, in Patna, Aryabhatta was born in Ujjain, Aryabhatta was born in Kerala. Where was Patanjali born? Patanjali was born in Afghanistan, Patanjali was born in Tamil Nadu, Patanjali was born in Bihar, Patanjali was born in Bengal, Patanjali was born in Gujarat. Even about historic, where was Panini born? Same kind of confusion. Where does Kalidasa belong? Kalidasa worked in Ujjain. Kalidasa is a historic figure, right? He's not a fictional figure. We have no clue where he was born. Only thing we can clearly say, whether Kalidasa belonged to Ujjain or Kashmir, we don't know. Only thing through proofs we can say is that Kalidasa didn't belong to south of India, which you cannot talk about Vasa, which you cannot talk about other people or Aryabhatta. Why? I am so confident that he didn't belong to south of India because he has made a mistake. in how the cardamom grows, how the pepper grows. He has made mistake in his poetry. So this is how a historic, it's like a detective story, right? A historian will take it, this kind of clues. So you eliminate that, because a person who is native to, say, Kalidasa, because Kalidasa's many of the poetry's original manuscripts were found in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So for many years, many historians thought that perhaps he was born here and then he migrated to Jain. But then the clue came when they were seeing that he has made mistakes in the poetry where he has told cardamom is a creeper. Cardamom is not a creeper. So who is native to that, this part of the country will not. If somebody says coconut tree is a creeper, then you immediately know that he doesn't belong to the coast. He doesn't belong to the place from Goa to Kerala or Odisha or Andhra Pradesh. He definitely could be in those days, I'm telling Himalayas or Himachal, where he went and seen a coconut tree at that time. I'm not talking about now, thousands of years before. Or similarly, somebody says ice is green in color, totally green in color. I'm talking 2000 years back. Definitely, you know that he has never seen the ice. He's never been in Himalaya, so he could be only from the peninsular part of the country, isn't it? So a historian might be using this kind of clues to tell when they were born, where they were born. Where Adi Shankara was born, Adi Shankara himself says where he was born. He calls himself Dravida Shichu. So this is what a job of historians, like a detective's job of historian to find this out. But you will get only this much. You will get it only hard facts. You won't get what they thought. You won't get what was the conversation. You won't know how other people lived. Even you talk about, say you are writing a historic fiction about Buddha. Where was Buddha born? You talk about Lumbini, you talk about Kabilavastu, you talk about another 7 or 8 claimants for Buddha where he was born. Because there is no historic records. So if you write, if you tell somebody the story of Buddha without even telling where he was born, or how was the palace, who was his wife, who was other people, what did he think before he became Buddha? This is what it makes interesting. No, I was writing Chakravarti Ashoka. We have put a lot of fiction into that. We took only what, it went for around 2.5 years, 3 years in the Colors TV. It was one of the hit series, Chakravarti Ashoka. So I'm answering this question, that why historic fiction? If I put only what is available about Ashoka, I can make hardly a half-an-hour documentary, not a series going for 3 years. And hardly anyone would have known about it. Because this is a medium, television is a big medium, film is a big medium, novels, books are a big medium. You are reaching the story of these people. Otherwise, we would forget it totally. Why we remember Lord Ram, why we remember Krishna, why we remember Prithviraj, why we remember Chhatrapati Shivaji is not because they were great rulers. They were great rulers, no doubt. But there are many other great rulers. Like, for example, no offense meant, Chakravarti Shivaji was a brilliant ruler. Rana Pratap is a great ruler. But if you go strictly by the area they had ruled, the number of years they had ruled, Prithviraj is a king in a small area. There are much bigger kings in India, across India, who had ruled for 40, 50 years, who had won almost all the wars, whereas Prithviraj lost his last war. I'm making a point, please listen. It's not to make somebody boil their blood and all if there are any fans. India has a lot of fandoms. I'm not talking about fans or bucks or anything like that. I'm talking a pure logical point here. Prithviraj's kingdom was a small kingdom in and around Delhi. If you take those periods map, you can find that huge, majestic, prosperous empire even at that time, who didn't lose a war. Take the example of Pulikesi, who had defeated Harshavardhan. Right, we know more about Harshavardhan than Pulikesi. Pulikesi is one of the greatest emperors of India. But we know more about Harshavardhan because Harshajarta was written, historical fiction was written. We have less about Pulikesi, who defeated many times Harshavardhana. This is why historical fiction becomes important. Prithviraj, the folk tales is a kind of historical fiction, not purely in the modern sense of historical fiction, but historical fiction is that we remember Prithviraj. We remember less of Gautamiputra Shatakarni. Gautamiputra Shatakarni was one of the greatest emperor of India. We remember Prithviraj, who would not have been even a vassal king in they didn't live in the same time. But had they lived at the same time, Prithviraj's territory, some total of achievement would not have been even a panchayat or a vassal level for Gaudamiputra Satakarni, which or Lalitaditya of Kashmir was a much bigger king, or Rajaraja Chola, who had ruled almost half the known world of that time. You know less about him than Chhatrapati Shivaji. Why? Because it was not Chhatrapati Shivaji laid the foundation of Maratha Empire, but we have a lot of plays on Chhatrapati Shivaji, and what he did was, or Rana Pratap actually was a great, he resisted the Mughal rule, that's all, right? It's a great thing to do. I'm not saying it's something bad or I mean something lesser achievement. It was a great achievement. But if you take our 4,000 years history, there are kings across the country, from Rashtrakutas to Chalukyas to Cholas to Cheras to Gajapadis to Pala kings to Lalitadityas of Kashmir to Jat kings. We have so much history, to Pallavas, Pandyas, who had huge, majestic Kakatiyas, Yadavas, and talking across the country. Of course, Mauryas, Guptas, who had much larger empire, who had contributed much more to 400 years, 500 years, 1,000-year-old, like Vijayanagara, the majestic cities. Why? Because this became a historic fiction, a folk tale. That is why, Mr. Kabil, the historic fiction is important. As a storyteller, our job is to select our heroes and tell it in an entertaining fashion without deviating much. Like, you cannot change. Like, it's a mythological fiction, but I wrote it like historical fiction, like Asura. When I wrote Asura, my first book, Ravan's Ramayan, I didn't make it like Ravan won over Ram and ruled Lanka forever, right? So, if it is a history, it's a mythology, of course, it's Purana, it's a Kavya, but if it is history, you are talking about the Battle of Panipat. You cannot write that Britishers lost. You cannot write in Battle of Talikota that Vijayanagara won and the 5 Dakkani Sultanates lost. No, Vijayanagara lost that and the city was destroyed. The dharma or the duty of the writer is to create the atmosphere, create how the war was lost. For example, if I take the Battle of Talikota, you are writing history. It is very simple. The way you write is like Vijayanagara Empire already had some schisms, and Ramaraya, Ali Ramaraya, the great emperor, who was actually not the emperor, he was actually a regent. Emperor was his nephew. Ali Ramaraya, who was a son-in-law of the great emperor Krishnadevaraya, he was ruling this thing, but even at the age of 90, he was refusing to give away his power to the next generation. And he was interfering in every place, creating schisms in other places. He was a brilliant ruler, great ruler. So you write history like that. What happened on so-and-so date? They had almost won. And then in the last moment, one of the regiments had betrayed him. He had got a foreign regiment and they had betrayed him. They had already had an alliance with the Bahami Sultanates and they betrayed him, and an arrow came and hit, same like Himu, his eyes. And then he fell down, he was trampled, he was captured by the sultans, and then that's all. So in 20 minutes, I told the story of Battle of Talikota. But if you as a writer is writing it, you will go into the mind of each of these people. You will go into the mind of Ali Ramaraya, why he is not giving, what made him so, what are his issues. He was somebody who had destroyed the Portuguese, almost. Yet why did he lose such an important war in life? What prompted him to go to the war at the age of 90 in an era where people lived up to the age of 40 maximum? So what made the empire so strong? Maybe because he was such an able ruler and he had the capability to make Vijayanagara so powerful. But that itself led to the fall. So he had suspected his people. He didn't perhaps trust enough of his successes. So what were their character? You have no historical proof on that, what they thought. So you bring color to all these things. What would they have spoken? What they would have talked about? On the eve of the attack, what would have been the planning? And there are various other things, whether they had their wife, their kids, whether they had enemies, whether they had childhood friends. You might not find all these people in the pages of history. So you take, that is why it is called historical fiction. You fictionalize certain characters. You keep the main characters. You don't move away from the character. You cannot show Chhatrapati Shivaji as not a brave person or a person without strategy. The character you will not move around. You cannot show Prithviraj as a coward, isn't it? Because he was a brave warrior. What you will show is you humanize him. It's not that the bravest man never felt fear. His fear might not be dying in the war. His fear might be perhaps losing the war and losing the face. What if I don't die? That might be his fear. But that fear emotion plays a big part in writing. I am taking the kind of figures so that these are all very sensitive figures, right? Rana Pratap or Prithviraj or Chhatrapati Shivaji, hugely respected figures. When we are talking about them, even when you do, you keep a kind of great respect and reverence to them. But understand that as a writer, your duty is not to make them gods. Your duty is to make the people connected to them. Make the reader or the viewer connected to the person. So when I am writing Ashoka, I will make Ashoka vulnerable. I will show the fears of Ashoka. I will show the emotion of Ashoka. And a hero is not somebody who doesn't feel anything. Hero is not someone who doesn't feel fear. A hero is someone who overcomes the fear. So unless you build up the fear, so see how beautifully Valmiki had done this. He shows, I'm not talking about the later day Ramayana. If you are writing historic fiction, even though it is not historic fiction, it is necessary that you read Valmiki Ramayana. I won't even say Mahabharata. You should definitely read Mahabharata, but Mahabharata could be so confusing because it is so layered and complicated. Valmiki Ramayana follows a perfect, if you learn more about writing, it's a perfect hero's act structure that you can Google and see what is a hero's act structure. Because in half an hour I cannot cover it. But only this thing I would say, in Valmiki Ramayana, you can use Valmiki Ramayana as a blueprint in writing historic fiction. A bad historic fiction would be like, just make the hero always, it's like a masala film, the hero always wins. Hero faces nothing, no issues. But in Ramayana, the greatest hero who, if you take it very rationally, Rama could have been a great king who became a god. If you go in the devotional way, it's a god who came as a man. Either way you can take, it doesn't matter. As a writer, you will have to have your voice, depending on your belief system. Nothing is right or wrong as per our thought process, Indian thought process. Out of 6 systems of philosophy, 3 are atheistic in nature in India. So if it is, you feel to write, try not to deify it. It is the reader or the viewer who should feel that this hero is godlike. That's how we did it in Baahubali. Baahubali, when it was conceived also, you show heroism, but you show vulnerability. And Baahubali, if you see the film and if you read my books, they are 2 different things. The film, it is conceived differently because all different mediums. In book, the advantage of book is you can go inside the character. So if you read the Maheshwadi, Queen of Maheshwadi, Baahubali series on which the Netflix play is coming, what I had done that is that I had written each chapter from viewpoint of every character, including the villains. So the Balala Deva also, the Bijala Deva also will have chapters where you are talking through his mind. That is a novel writing technique or a Netflix series. Netflix series, OTT series are very much like novels. Films are more like short stories. Basic difference. So when you write in Ramayana, you find that Valmiki makes Ram go through all kind of issues. He's not Bhagavan in the sense that how Tulsidas or Kambar made him into Bhagavan. He is Bhagavan because of his act. He's a human. He has all the flaws of human. So they go through different dilemmas. He has to take a decision whether to go to forest, where he has to take a decision whether he should take his wife. He has to take a decision. Even when the brother comes and Bharat comes and pleads him, he takes a decision and he stands with his word. And then, can you imagine it writing a film like that? Forget it is Ram. Can you imagine a film in a modern day masala film? Can you imagine writing? Is somebody talking? Can you imagine writing the hero's wife is taken away by the villain? In Ramayana, they had done that. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that writing now? Here, then the Ram cries for the entire chapter, entire verses. After that, almost 30, 35 verses. After that is Ram's lamentation. He's seeing Sita's face everywhere. You are showing Ram's vulnerability. And Valmiki does one up also. He shows when Indrajit is dead, he shows the vulnerability of Ravan also. That is great writing. Finally, when you end up with, you understand Ram is almost like God, but at the same time, you come with a grudging respect for Ravan also. This is the dharma of a writer. When you write historic fiction, if you are writing Akbar versus Rana Pratap, if the fiction has to work, you may love Akbar, hate Rana Pratap, you may love Rana Pratap, hate Akbar, it doesn't matter. Your personal choices doesn't matter. At the end of the book, you will tell story of one person, but at the end of the book, you will come up with a respect to every character in that. You are talking about Jallianwala Bagh, you will come with, if not respect, understanding the fears and vulnerability of General or Dyer also. I'm telling you something very important, crucial. You will come up with, this is what Valmiki did. If he can make, if Vyasa can make you sympathize with Duryodhana also, if you read not TV Mahabharata I'm talking, read actual Mahabharata, you finally come up with a grudging respect for every character in Mahabharata. So when you write historic fiction, irrespective of which side you are in, irrespective of who you are going to make hero, because historic fiction mostly is about heroes or heroines, hero in the sense and gender neutral I'm talking, yet all characters needs to be understood by the reader or the audience, why they are doing it, and how important it is to be in their minds also. Because in history or in life, every character is a hero in their mind. As a writer, your duty is to get into the minds of the character. I think beyond this, I may not be able to say. It's already 40 minutes I have taken. Quickly, we can go to the question answer session.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot. Now, Sneha Gupta, who is our PRO, she will coordinate this question answer session, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Namaskar, Neelakantan, sir. Very warm welcome. So let's start our question and answer session. The
Yeah,
first question is I think it's by Kapil.
I think
No,
Kapil's
sir.
question I
Vikas
answered.
Dhingia. Vikas Dhingia. So,
Yeah.
so he's asking when we have to create or write about a character that was real in past, but not any data or clue about him or her, or even his or her name is in history, then what are the points we have to mind and focus?
First thing is when you are writing historical fiction in the real or hardly any data will be available, especially in the Indian context. Whatever data is available, it is available only after the advent of perhaps the British Europeans who had meticulously recorded it. So when Europeans record it, it will be through their viewpoint. You have to keep that in mind. When they write, they called the first war of, they are not wrong per se, it is all depending on your perspective. They called it as Sepoy Mutiny, the first war of independence. We call it first war of independence. If you are writing that, you are lucky because lots of records, at least from the British side, will be available. What our people thought, hardly anything we have. That is where you have to use your imagination. There is no other choice. People will forgive you for it. You have to create characters But research is very important, and Google is not a research source. Why I'm saying Google is not a research source? In Wikipedia is not a research source. 100 things will be written, even what we had written as fiction for many of the television series has come now in Wikipedia as an authentic document. I don't know which idiot is doing that, but it is a harsh truth in India. So if you Google about many of the things, it will be written by writers like us for some television series or for films or so for some books. And they have become authentic records now because people are, even history students are using Wikipedia as a reference. Please don't use Wikipedia, go to the library. Plenty of archives are available. Plenty of available material is there in the internet as archives. It's a small price to pay library membership for a writer. You cannot avoid that. Use libraries, invest in some books. If you cannot afford books, I can understand as a beginning writer, many of the books could be expensive. Share with it, or PDF is available. A lot of PDF, not just Google, there are other search engines. There are resources available. Archives are available wherever it is available. Where it is not available, you will have to create it with a disclaimer that we have created it. You put it in the appendix or epilogue. Say, you be honest to if it's a book, if it's a series, the disclaimer is always shown, saying that many of the characters are imaginary. That is why it is not called history. Nobody is going to put a question paper and put it in the civil service exam and ask you the question based on that. It is meant for enlightenment and entertainment, but it serves a big role because, as I said, why Harshavardhana is remembered more than the person who had defeated him many times, than Puligeshi, is because Harshajarada and a lot of fictions were written on him. Why Rana Pratap is more famous than Gautamiputra Satakarni or Rajaraja Chola is precisely because of this reason. Chola became famous later, despite building, just imagine the power of fiction, despite building one of the biggest temples in the world, one of the biggest monuments in the world. Rajaraja Chola really started becoming famous even in Tamil Nadu after Kalki had written the Ponniyin Selvan, not before that. There is a power of historic fiction. Despite defeating the Dutch and ending the Dutch Empire, Dutch had conquered Indonesia, Dutch had conquered most of the Far East. Why we are not speaking in Dutch and why we are speaking in English is perhaps we have to thank one man and his generals, that is Marthanda Varma, the one who built the Padmanabha, one of the richest temples in the world, Padmanabha temple, who modernized the Padmanabha temple. But even people in Kerala came to know about him much more after C.V. Ramampillai had written the Marthanda Varma novel. In 100 years, people had forgotten him even after such a great war. One of the first historical fictions in India was written in 1890s, 1900s in Kerala, and at least in the southern part of India, Marthanda Varma became famous. So this is the plight. So that is why it is important that you have to create characters sometimes if required with a disclaimer. Next question.
Yes, sir. So next question is from Sohar Day. Sir, how important is it to grasp the ambience and the vocabulary of the era we are talking about while writing a historical fiction?
It depends on which language you are using, vocabulary. If you are writing in English, half your problem is solved because none of these characters would have spoken English unless you are writing about England or the Britishers. So for me, that problem was solved since I am writing about Mahabharata and Ashoka and all those things. Of course, Ashoka was in Hindi. When you are writing in English, try to use contemporary language. It doesn't mean they will call each other dude and all those things, but try to use a typical newspaper kind of English. If you are writing in English, it should not be Facebook English. It should not be your WhatsApp English. But it could be a journalistic, say the Hindus or perhaps Telegraph's English. That kind of English you can use, or Times of India's English also is fine. But they should not be using college slangs. That's the only thing you have to worry about. But if you are using Indian languages, again, I would suggest make it as contemporary as possible, except in a few. It's a technique where you use a few old words just to give the feel of it. A certain obscure, if you really see the Hindi spoken 300 years back is not the Hindi, nobody will understand. Bengali spoken 250 years back, or even forget 1,000 years back. 250 years back, nobody is going to understand it. If you use exactly the same word, the languages keep evolving. You try watching a black and white film of 60s and 70s, you find that the entire languages, and watch a new film now, in 50 years, language has changed. The 50 years, how people love has changed. How the lovers speak to each other has changed. I wonder whether it was only poets who loved, and all the old films, they are so poetic about how the lovers talk and the films and all. Even that has changed, right? Now, if you use those kind of words, people will laugh. So when you are writing books, when you are writing shows now, try to be as contemporary as possible without going over the top, without using WhatsApp language, without using short forms. Use only certain words to it. But ambience should be of that era. Setting is very important. And one is vocabulary, other is setting. Setting is how there you need a lot of research, whether saddle had already come. The saddle started coming only from the Mongoloids' time. So before that, an example I'm telling, saddles were there, glass was there. He looked at a mirror, whether mirror were there. He was looking at through a telescope. When was a telescope invented? What was the equivalent of it? All those things you'll have to bring out. What was the lamp used? When was it invented? Even when I was writing the Baahubali series, I need not have worried about all these things. I stopped my writing for 15 days because I had to use a folk song. A war is happening, some folk song is happening in between, the climax of Rise of Shivagami. I'm writing it in English, but I got some Telugu songs, folk songs. And then I was worried whether my period is set in 900 AD, the Baahubali period. Because in the film, if you see, there is a Arab merchant who is coming, Muslim merchant who is coming. So it had to be after the advent of Islam when they were coming and iron was invented. So I had set that period at that time. Then I had to think about, but it's a fictional world also. So I had to think about when was that kind of folk songs were told. And I had to find a folk song which was older than that to put there. And then translate it to English and put it. So these are the detailing which you do. 99% of the readers are not going to bother about it. But it gives you immense satisfaction also, and it gives an immersive experience. So how are the swords? Then you go on research of what kind of sword they were using. Even the sword you use is different from Indian and the Europeans. European mostly they use, either they use two hands with the big sword, or if they use the blade with which they poke. But Indians had bigger armors. You poke, nothing will happen. The sword will break. We have the talwar kind of thing, the curved ones. So when you are writing the stand, a person who is doing fencing, how he is using is different from a person who is using the Indian kind of talwar. If it's a South Indian war, they will be using the urmi. You would have seen the big sword belt, the huge one, the urmi, the kalari and all, the 12 feet long ribbon kind of belt. So the way in which they move will be different. When you are writing a stand, it will be different. So all those things are detailing. Next question.
Yeah. The next question is from Kainat. Your writing often is from the perspective of the traditional antagonist and supporting characters. My book too is a retelling of historical events from the POV of a peripheral character. What are your tips in making sure my Watson is not overshadowed by my Holmes?
See, if you read Gone with the Wind, why I'm telling Gone with the Wind? Gone with the Wind is set in it's a great love story. It's a totally fictional character set in a historical era during the American Civil War. You read Gone with the Wind, historical characters come and go. But it is the audience is with the protagonist. If you read Tale of Two Cities, historical characters come and go. But the audience is with the protagonist. We have very less number of that kind of fiction in India. But if you are writing that, the historical thing is just a peripheral thing. It's a setting. It's not the story. So you need not worry on that. It is just a setting of the story where you are showing in so and so war happened and the hero is going to that war or heroine is going to that war and the first war of independence is happening. So these are all become setting and your peripheral character is the hero. So it is the historical events are as important as how much it affects the heroes or the character's life. That's all. You said you talk about Thomas. You are not talking about actually which army came to curb which riot. You're talking a riot is happening, and it's a story of these families there in the border district. You talk about train to Pakistan. It's a historical fiction, right? In Indian context also. You are not talking about, you are not going to tell what Nehru said, what Patel said, what Jinnah said in that. What they said will be there. But what they were doing, it is nothing. You are with the protagonist. Yeah.
So the next question is from Aditya Suryavanshi. So while writing a story in which the main character has a short lifespan and a lot of battles happening in short interval, how to pace the story that the fatigue doesn't set in and doesn't become monotonous to the reader? Sir.
First of all, it is very difficult to hold only a battle scene in a novel. It's a short story, it will work. For a film, it may work. If you are writing a series, it's very difficult. So that's what you use a technique of backstories. So what you do is you show it from multiple point of view, characters, and weave the story in. It's a bit tough task you are asking. So you go into flashbacks because if it is a novel, you always have the liberty of stopping it somewhere else, slowing the time down, and going back into it and coming back. What you have to put is time. Evening 3 o'clock, or whichever thing you are using, prahar or nadiga or whatever your time you are using. Time so and so afternoon this date, 3:23 p.m. You describe the entire thing. Then in that you put he was injured, and then a chariot fell on him or whatever it is, or he was dragged away. The horse dragged him away and took him to the jungle, and then a flashback. Then you go to his story of what happened 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And then he is flooding and just putting, he's feeling he's drowning and there's a flood and he opened his mind, it is raining, he's still lying in the bush. And his enemies are searching for him. You come back to that, come back to action. So you break the monotony. And just telling it as I don't know what story it is, I'm just telling whatever you told, I'm just telling it. So you weave back and forth from one place to another to stretch it and to make the people immersed. You keep just telling, it will become a commentary. This chariot came from here, this gun boomed from here, then this horse came from here, then this came from here. It will look like a football commentary. So never do that. Next, please.
The next question is from Alia. Sir, how much fictional liberty can be taken when you have a protagonist who existed, but there are little to no records? I usually use what I know as dots and use fiction as lines that join them.
As I said, no, in India, you will hardly find much of about, unless it is recent history, say after Britishers have come and they have put meticulous records. Before that, you hardly have anything much about history. Recently, I was doing something on Vasco da Gama. I don't even know the name of the Samarin. He came and met the Calicut. That's all you know. You don't know the name of the Samarins. You know only the title. It's like saying he met the king. Samarin or Samudri is a title. Whether he was Manaveda, there are 3 or 4 names which keeps repeating. You don't even know when they ruled and all those things. And they have fought a 100-year war. So you don't even know. So then you will have to go to the historical records and see what was the common name and put a pet name to him, which definitely will not come in the record, so people will believe it. Definitely all these people, mother will be calling a name. No, you put a name to that and play around with it. Only thing what you have to do is you don't change the characterization of the person. As I said, no, you cannot show Prithviraj as Prithviraj as vulnerable, you can show. I'm taking Prithviraj as an example, okay? But you cannot show him like, you cannot go either way. You cannot show him that he won the war in the first time itself. I'm not talking about the folktale where he shot the arrow and all. I'm talking about you're writing, you're ending it there, no? You cannot go and show totally opposite to that. You cannot show that all the people in the Jallianwala Bagh went and lynched General Dyer and none of them were shot. Then it will become like some other thing. It is not historic fiction. It becomes a fantasy. That instead of when Godse came to kill Gandhi, Gandhi took his stick and bet Godse up is a fantasy, right? It's not a fiction. So you won't change any of this thing. You won't change the characterization of the people. If you are talking about Gandhiji, Gandhiji will remain Gandhiji. What you change is how others perceive him. That's the only thing you can change. So maybe selfish reason, but why I will say you read my Asura and Ajaya is I have not changed any incident in Ramayana or Mahabharata. I use some Ramayana or Mahabharata. Or Vanara, my book on Bali, Sugriva and Tara. Because I can only tell what I have written. It's easier for me to tell. No, I didn't change the fact that Ram killed Bali hiding behind a tree. I cannot change that fact. I didn't change the fact that Bali is a hero of my book. Didn't take Tara forcefully. I wrote it. Why of it? That I give justification. That is where the fiction acts. What of it you cannot change. You cannot change the date. You cannot say India won freedom on 2014 or 2018 or 2022. It has to be 1947, August 15, if we are talking about the freedom from the British. Those dates are sacrosanct. You cannot change that. You cannot change the fact that the tricolor had gone up and freedom at midnight when the world sleeps, the speech was given by Nehru. What you can change? You put a character who thinks that this is no freedom at all. I don't believe in this freedom. That is your choice if you are telling from that viewpoint. For me, the freedom will come only when entire India is India. That's a character's viewpoint. Or somebody says only when communist era comes and India becomes like Russia, then only it is my freedom. These are all the viewpoints of characters. So you get conflict, two different characters thinking totally opposite. Both are against the person who is hoisting the flag. Just as an historical example, I'm telling. I'm not telling this is good, this is bad. I'm telling how stories are written. Got it? Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is from Ikshu Sharma. Sir, how do we write about sensitive issues like communal events in writing about personal accounts and trauma set in the past while keeping present day thought processes? So,
Writer has to be fearless or don't go into this profession. One day or other, something or other may become controversial. I have written almost all controversial books, every one of them, like Ravana as hero, Duryodhana as hero, Vanara, Bali as hero. Baahubali might be the least controversial book. Other than that, all are could be a controversial book, but it didn't become controversy because I never disrespected the. It should not be a propaganda, right? Whatever good fiction like Rudyard Kipling was a pakka racist. He had a very colonial mindset, but he's such a brilliant writer. Lord Kim, there could not be more patronizing book than Lord Kim, right? There, he was the one who told it is brown, it's a white man's burden about India. But he is worth studying it, whether you like him or not. Why? Because when he writes about Indians, he goes into he is the one who created Mowgli. He goes into the mind of the character. So when you are writing sensitive issue, suppose you are writing about partition, it's a very sensitive issue, right? It is sensitive to many people in various ways, and the wounds are, at least in the northern part of the country, south never faced it. For us, it is all fiction. But people in Punjab, people in Bengal, it was a harsh reality. From grandparents, many or great grandparents, many of the people would be, the wounds are still carried on either side of the border. Definitely, you will take a side when you are writing it. If you are in, everybody will have their own, whether you like it or not, our growing up and other things will come in our mentality. So definitely you'll be taking a side, like Rudyard Kipling took the side of the British. But why those books became great is because you are sympathetic to the other side also. Because even when you are writing about Hitler or Pol Pot, you have to spend some time in their mind. That is what makes it a great fiction. Otherwise, the story falls flat. Otherwise, it will become a slapping match. I am the hero, the other is villain. The villain is bad. You just go there and slap him around. That's it. What is interesting? Who wants to read 500 pages of that? it becomes interesting when you, so how do you handle sensitivity? You show what actions, if people had killed so many people, if Dyer had killed 2000 people in Jallianwala Bagh, all your anger on Dyer, you will not show as a storyteller. You will show it through a character in your book. Who is your hero? Maybe you can give him the last word in an argument. Maybe you can give it to Sardar Udham, the last word. But the Dyer will have his justification. He will say, I am protecting my people. They had made the British people in Chauri Chaura, they had killed so many people. I have to keep it may be wrong for you. You may feel what nonsense this fellow is talking, but you are inside the Dyer's mind. So you'll have to think like Dyer and say, or he will say, us din kya ho gaya yaar, pagal ho gaya tha. At least that. He repents, something like that, if you want to take it that way. If you make him like the old television series villain, ha 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 ha, maine maar diya, whatever you want, you do it. It's not interesting then. You cannot be, then it is no fiction, no? There is no novel, there is no grace in the novel. So that is how you handle the sensitive issue. So when I wrote from Duryodhana's point of view, I am sometimes inside the mind of Yudhishthir. I am inside the mind of Draupadi. And I am showing what all the problems of Duryodhana is. I am showing what all the problems of Ravana is. So I didn't go to Ram. I showed it through another character called Bhadra. So Bhadra, the common man in Ravan, he finds the faults of Ravan also. What are his problems? Whereas Ravan might not see what is his problem. This is all the storytelling techniques, which as you write, you will get it. You read a lot, you will get it by yourself.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, that's what.
Next question is from Vaishnavi. She is asking, is it imperative that we stick to historical dates, or is it all right if we stretch a real few days into few weeks in a historical fiction book, as long as the events are chronological and within the same year? Please, sir.
Ideally, you should not do that because there is something called believability. There are lots of people who will go and search for it. Even a small mistake, people, once you are a writer whose books are widely read, there will be people writing to you talking about minor mistakes. Like you write, he had he attacked him from this side and he killed him in one of my books. He killed him with a swipe of his sword. I had written, it's a simple word. The question I got was, he was carrying a baby. How can he use it? Use his right hand. You never said that he had transferred the baby to the left. So did you drop the baby and use it? This much minute detail readers will go. It happens after, say, 3-4 chapters. And the time lapse also is 4 hours. He could have definitely changed the baby. But I have not written about it. Immediately the reader has, it is in the back of the mind somewhere. So when you change the date, somebody knows the date, he says, this is bullshit. Immediately the believability factor is gone. Then he won't believe any of the fiction you have written. Then the story falls down. So never change the dates. Dates are sacrosanct, not even by an hour. Which are verifiable. Which are not verifiable, you can take the chance. If you are sure that they are not verifiable.
Yeah. So questions are over now. So thank you so much, sir, for explaining today's topic so perfectly and for replying all the questions. Vikram, sir, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it was very fascinating and very engaging, and I'm sure that our YUVA authors would take some tips out of this session. Especially, the important point, one of the most important point that you really made was about the dignity of the characters that you create. Even if they may not not only the heroes, even the anti-heroes, even the villains, even for that matter, even the minor characters that you are creating, the entire ecosystem that you build, you must be having you must create that kind of dignity and grace for all of them, before they fall, in the larger picture ultimately. And I think one of the questions that's related to the language, and when you said that you can write in the contemporary language, I think that would solve the problem of many of the people who are facing that particular problem, where how to place the dialogue and the diction of the characters who may be based in the 19th century or maybe in the early 20th century and so on and so forth. And I think maybe
Sir, I will,
you
sir, excuse me, sir, I'll add one more thing, one small
yeah,
technique. You use the form of address of that era. You don't call like Maratha, you are telling Srimant or Janab. You use the form of address of those era, what they were Huzur, whatever of that era they were using. Sir is SIRE, if it is a medieval England you are talking about. So those you use, rest you use the modern language. So in
yeah,
between the connect will come.
yeah. So
Sorry.
there is some kind of what I mean that ambience is created, some sprinkling of that period is there. But naturally, I mean, if you really want to write in a language or diction in which you are not comfortable with, it will not be possible for you to carry forward with the narrative and the creation of the characters. We are extremely very grateful to Shri Neelakantan ji for finding this time from out of his busy schedule, and I'm sure that the inputs and the insights that you have given today would keep our authors in good state in the long term. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Good writing. I wish you all the best. I hope we'll meet again in person. Thank you, sir. Thank you for arranging this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.